Thank you so very much. Such a glorious day, and it's such a pleasure and an honor to have with us the author, Professor Aruna Chakravarti, who has once again opened the box for the Jack in the Box to come out on the Bhawal Shonnashi case. Of all the many tracts that one has read in the last 100 and maybe 12 years, I think what is congratulatory about this Mendicant Prince is Dr. Mrs. Chakravarti's inclusion of feminist angles and women's voices. Dr. Chakravarti has been the principal of a well-known Delhi college under Delhi University for over 10 years. And she has, to her credit, 17 books, of which 2 are novels, 5 are novels, and 2 short stories, and a whole collection of translations and many other publications. I think what I enjoyed reading very much in the last week was The Women of Jurashanko, her book on the daughters of Jurashanko. So without further ado, let me just say that in the North American universities, where I have been teaching for a while, the case of the Bhawal Shonnashi is still very much front and center when we teach post-colonial revisitations of what was very much a part of the colonial enterprise. There have been post-colonial historians, writers such as Partho Chatterjee, who've depended more on the legal proofs of the cases which ran across 3 continents, 3 countries, I think. Yes, of the case, and England, yes. But the first question I'd have for Dr. Chakravarti is, how did you configure the new way of presenting a novel on, we were talking a little while ago about, in the past session, on facts and fiction. And how does that figure in your text?
Hello.
Is this working? Yeah. You just have to hold it very close.
Is it working? Okay. Well, you've actually asked 2 questions in one, Julie. The first one was how I got interested, or why I wrote this book, why I took up this project. And there's a very simple answer to that. You see, I have some friends who are distantly related to the Bhawal family. And naturally, everybody wants their own stories to be told. And prior to writing this novel, I had written 3 novels, all family fictions, fictional histories, you could put it. One was the history of my own paternal ancestors, and 2 were about the women in the Tagore family. So these friends of mine said, you've written 3 fictional histories, so why not another? Why don't you write about the Bhawals? And I had heard the story many years ago, I mean, in fact, at the age of 10. But somehow that story stuck with me. There was so much of interest, so many different aspects to the story. I mean, there was intrigue, there was suspense, there was history of royalty, which is always very engaging, very interesting. And there was also this business of loss of identity and reclaiming of identity, a prince who becomes a sannyasi and becomes a prince again. So all these things were very exciting, particularly for a child. And I got very sort of caught with this. But of course, I didn't ever think of writing about it till, as I said, my friends got after me. So that answers the first part of your question. Now, the question that came to my mind was, see, this is a well-known case. The facts are documented. They're out in the public domain. Most Bengalis know about it, at least Bengalis of my generation and maybe the next generation and an earlier generation. Very young people probably don't. But what could I write that was different? That can catch the imagination, or can, in a sense, justify writing another book. And then it struck me that the thing that had been left out of most of the writing that had preceded mine was the viewpoint of the women of the family. You see, women are extremely impacted by whatever goes on in the family. And yet, in most cases, nobody ever hears of them. They're just names, a list of names. So I thought I could make it into a novel, into a piece of fiction. And I would do that by using a multiplicity of voices, mainly women's voices, giving their own story. And each of them is telling a part of the story, and in telling that part, their story, they're also revealing themselves, their own characters, their own personalities, their interpersonal relations, etc. Now, of course, since I knew nothing about any of them, I had to use fiction in a big way. I had to use my imagination in a big way. And that is what I did. And I must say I enjoyed it enormously. You know, giving each person a distinct, even a background. I didn't know their backgrounds. You know, even parentage and background, and then a personality, distinguishing characteristics, hopes, aspirations, loves, hates, etc. So because they were all women living in a palace, and all the palace intrigue and scandal and everything that goes on, their husbands had mistresses. So all their repressed feelings, I thought nobody would ever give a thought to them. So let me, even if it's imagined, it's all imagined, let me give them a voice and let each woman tell her own story.
Excellent. Dr. Chakravarti, there is, it is a very fraught novel because for those of us who are students or scholars of feminism or feminist texts, you would know very well, it's a very problematic story because I first encountered the story when somebody from their family, I was 16 years old, they'd come to visit. And the description of the syphilitic Mejda, the prince,
Major Kumar.
Yes, the Major Kumar, was abhorrent, but at the same time, it fitted in with whether you're talking French feminists like Hélène Cixous or our own feminist philosophies in India, that the man probably got the just rewards. But at the same time, I think what you've excelled in the book is to bring out the different versions, the perceptions of, say, his mother, his grandmother, his first wife, Vibhabhuti, and his second wife, Dhara, I think, and Elokeshi. And all of that paints the picture of this absolutely horrible womanizer. Now, when we put these perspectives of these women that you have excavated so effectively into the context of 20th or 21st century musings on feminism, how do you make this, the two different aspects of feminism, talk to each other?
Well, actually, frankly, Julie, I like to keep myself out of my writing. And that's why I always write historical novels. People ask me, why is the past so compelling? Why do you keep writing about the past? And I think It's because I like to keep a distance between myself and the story I'm telling. Because I feel if I'm writing about the present, which is obviously the correct thing for me to do, I mean, the expected thing for me to do. In fact, a lot of people have asked me, you've been principal of a college, you've seen the younger generation, you know their hopes, their aspirations, their frustrations. Why don't you're the ideal person to write about them. But for some strange reason, I can't explain, except that it's too close. It's too close, and I feel I won't really be able to do justice unless there is some distance between me and my subject. So that was one of the things. So what I have tried to weave into this narrative is a sense of what, the as women of the present, we expect of our men, but at the same time, with an understanding of the context in which these women lived.
Yes.
And after all, 150 years ago, it was the expected thing. Girls were expected to, and particularly girls married into royal families, that your husband will have mistresses, will womanize, and that is part of life. But in Bibhabhuti's case, because she was also modern, she was educated, there was this conflict in her. She had to accept it, and yet she couldn't accept it, in her heart.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
that conflict is there.
Absolutely. Now, when we speak of Bibhabhuti, I think what you've once again, and I'm thinking for those of us who read a bit of literary theory, we'll know that the early 20th century literary theorist, Roland Barthes, applauded writers and the new wave of thinking that you leave the reasoning to the reader. And I think you've done a great job of that you haven't made judgments, and you've told the story as you wanted to as a fiction writer, and then with the death of the author, there is the birth of the writer. Or by the death of the writer, there is birth of the reader. So if you look at that aspect, what is it about the Bhawal Sannyasi case? I know it's about, the mysteriousness, the issues of identity and all those things. But what is it that makes it keep coming back in some form or another to haunt our imagination?
I think what really comes back is that the mystery was never solved. The man won the case, true. He won the case in all three courts. But his victory or the verdicts that were given by the courts was based on circumstantial evidence. Many years had elapsed between his alleged death. I mean, he died in 1909, and the case was started in 1930. So more than 20 years, about 22 years had elapsed, and most of the evidence in any case had vanished. And whatever little was left, I mean, the lawyers had their own, they created their own case history, studies, and the way they presented the case. But all of it was kind of, not very clear. And then to complicate matters even more, his wife denied that he was her husband. Now the question is, that is the moot question. When a wife denies her husband, how can you believe the courts? That is one of the things. And particularly when the courts didn't have that kind of, they didn't have any eyewitnesses. So that bit of mystery still remains. And that's why I think people want to come back over and over again to this case. You see, the thing here, what I've done is, of course, every author, every person, creates their own narrative. I mean, they read, they access the facts, they go through the facts, and then they have an idea of what happened. I too had an idea of what happened, but I didn't want to, sort of thrust it on people's faces. I didn't want to put it in my reader's head that, see, this is what I think. And that's why I didn't give the protagonist, the Major Kumar, a voice. I didn't give the villain, the so-called villain, Shotendranath, a voice. Because if they were given a voice, They would have told the story, and the mystery would have disappeared. And I don't want to demystify any of the characters. So, yeah. So that is why, I mean, of course, there are many hints in the novel which can lead the readers to form their own opinion. But I have left it really to the readers to form their own opinion.
Dr. Chakravarti, when we think about the issue of the colonial enterprise being so front and center of this case, and as a post-colonialist scholar, I would say it was to Major Kumar's advantage that he would get the estate and the land if it could be proved that he's one and the same as the Bhawal Shonashi with the Nagas. So if you look at it as in the eyes of a post-colonial critic, would you say in a way that the way you've portrayed the case manages to push the envelope again and hold it up to the reader to decide which way the case should have really gone? And how do you think you would lean on the side of the fact that the case was won by Major Kumar, despite the fact that it was a colonial state?
That's an interesting question. You see, this case was fought from 1930 onwards. And we all know that the national struggle started around that time, or even before that. So already the British were feeling a little shaky. They realized that they're losing ground. They're losing ground. That the jewel of the crown, the jewel in the British crown was soon going to slip from their hands. So there was a sense of melancholia. There was a sense of even nervousness. So in their nervousness, what they tried to do was to cling desperately to whatever they had. And that's why when all the three princes died and their wives, I mean, the wives were practically pushed out of the kingdom because the court of wards took on the administration of Bhawal and left them with so little money that they couldn't keep up the palace and their way of life. And so they all went away, and the palace was almost empty. So now what actually the British were trying in two ways. In one way, they were trying to appease the people and tell them, look here, we are not totally against you, because they knew the subjects were very pro-royalty. And so they did it by actually carrying out a coronation ceremony of the youngest Rani's, Choto Rani's adopted son. And this they did, as a sop. Like, we are not really against you. We don't want to hang on to the kingdom. We have all intentions of restoring the kingdom. But now the princes are all dead. This man who's coming and saying that we don't believe he's an imposter. And so, but we will give the kingdom to the adopted son of the Choto Rani, but let him grow up. Take it easy, take it slowly. But as a matter of fact, they never did. The man was 25 when the case was fought. This boy.
So there was almost 20-year lapse,
and yet they didn't hand over the kingdom. So they were playing this funny, strange game. On the one hand, they were trying to placate the subjects, and on the other hand, they were trying to tighten their hold. And so that is what really led to this kind of, this struggle.
Dr. Chakravarti, could you tell us a little bit about how you conjured or visualized the character of Vibhabhoti, whom I think you have, painted in a light which could be either way. You haven't really cast any aspersions on her, and yet you have shown us through those letters that her mother wrote to her brother, Shotendranath, that there could have been an unholy relationship between the brother and the sister, and that she couldn't find the kind of assurance or protection or love with Major Kumar, so she turned to her brother. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, yes, I will. You see, the thing is that, I mean, one can't say for certain that there was some sort of incestuous relationship, though there was a very strong rumor. And this scandal, it even came up in court. It was discussed in court. But Justice Basu said he wouldn't encourage this line of questioning. So it was stopped. But the fact is that there were these rumors, and there was this big scandal about them. And the problem is that still one doesn't know. They are, after all, just rumors. One doesn't really know. So I had this very complicated task of presenting a woman whom I didn't want to present in a bad light. For some reason, I don't know what. I felt very empathetic, towards her. I didn't want to present her as a horrible woman who was having a incestuous relationship with her brother. So I've tried to imaginatively enter her psyche, enter the psyche of a woman like her. She lost her father when she was very young, and she adopted her brother as a kind of father figure. So the brother was, on the one hand, a father figure. On another hand, he was a companion. And on the third, he was also, I suppose, a kind of a protector. And when she came to the royal palace, the whole ambience of the palace, the way these people behaved, her mother-in-law's disdain of education, she wasn't allowed to read books, and she was very fond of reading books, and then her husband's negligence of her, his mistresses and all that, they must have, sort of isolated her so much that she started depending more and more on her brother. Mm. Now the question is, why did the brother, who had a family, he had a wife, he had children, why did he spend so many months in the year with his sister? Now that is a telling, it's a telling fact.
Yes, yes.
So, and so much so that his mother actually wrote to him, and that letter is a document, it's a factual record, saying that, why are you hanging on in Jaidepur? Come home. And she even at one point says, don't come up with any, stupid stories, because I know you. I know you. She wrote that. Yes. So, this person, there was definitely something, wrong with him. Another thing, wrong with him in the sense that he had a very malevolent influence on his sister. So that is what, I've tried to probe a woman who was sensitive, gentle, needy. She wanted love, she needed protection, which she didn't get from any members of her husband's family. So she sort of clung to her brother for comfort. He became a comfort zone in the palace, and that's why she kept telling him, come, why don't you come, don't go away. She sort of insisted that he be with her. And so this... I think it's a gray area, but there are sufficient hints. I've hinted at many possibilities, and I think the reader will be, intelligent enough to pick them up and then form their own opinion.
I think it's quite fascinating, actually. If you look at the case, even now, if you look at the two films which have been manufactured along the lines, I think it's worth noting that Bibhavati, the first wife, was a woman of some substance, because despite the fact that she was treated in the way she was, she managed to hold her own. And it's not as if she broke down. She was strategic, and we still don't think we have enough clues to prove whether Major Kumar was actually, there was an attempted murder, and you haven't really gone in there too much. So just as someone who has mined the story as an academic or as a researcher or just a storyteller, What do you think happened? And this is not putting you in the spot, Arunadi, just asking you. Do you think he was skilled?
I don't know if I should really make a clean breast of it, but personally, I do think he was. I do think he was. Because all the evidence went in his favor. And everybody recognized him, everybody. And actually, even though he didn't remember anything, he didn't say at any point in the court that, I was murdered. He said, I was not feeling too well, and the doctor gave me an injection. After that, I blacked out. And after I blacked out, my first memory is that I was lying in the crematorium, in the cremation ground, and then some sannyasis came and took me into a cave in which they were staying, and I had lost my memory. That's all he said. He never said that he was murdered. Interestingly, in Bibhapati's account also, she doesn't say that it's a murder. She says, he kept giving injections, and he kept saying, how they were constantly assuring her that he'll become all right, But the fact is, there was enough arsenic found in his blood. And that arsenic, and the doctors themselves said that in fact, one of the doctors said that if I want to kill somebody, the best way would be to give small arsenic in small doses, and then one day just give a large amount. So that, this death could be put down to a miscalculated dose, So that is what happened. Yes. I personally think that it was, because all the other things, sort of built up this narrative.
It's quite
all
interesting.
The other facts.
It's quite interesting the way you say that, he never said he was murdered. It would be difficult for a dead man to say, I was murdered. But yes, I think you made a wonderful point there, Arunadi. So, when you compare the challenges of writing about women and bringing out the women's voices in Mendicant Prince with the women of Daughters of Jorashako, where do you think your challenges were quite phenomenal?
Well, you see, where Jorashako women were concerned, again, there wasn't much known fact about them. They had all written small, essays in their family journal, but they were very, how shall I put it? They were extremely reticent about their lives. All of them said that they were very happy, they were very lucky that they were married into this illustrious family, and even one of the bows, the fourth brother's, Rabindranath's fourth brother's wife, her husband was insane. He was violently insane. And even she writes that she was very happy and very lucky, all that. So obviously it is that because they were living in a household, because they were writing in a paper which everybody would read, they couldn't really come out with their true feelings. So this reticence really deprived me, the author, of any insight into what they really thought, any insight into their soul. They just wrote just a few nice things about their in-laws. And very little else is known about the Tagores, but still something is known. Something is known. We know about their parentage, where they came from, who their parents were, and also something about their lives. But from the autobiography that Rabindranath himself wrote, there were just maybe glimmerings about the women, not much, but there was something. And also stray sentences in the biographies that Prabhat Kumar Mukherjee and Prashant Kumar Pal wrote on Rabindranath. So there was at least some material. So I could work on that material. I had something to hold on to. But where the Bhaval women were concerned, there was nothing at all. They were just names. Yeah. And so I had to make up the entire thing. Their backgrounds, their personalities. And if you notice, I've given them, different personalities.
Yes, absolutely.
And so all that is purely fictional. So that was a challenge, but I enjoyed doing it. I just let my imagination run riot.
And you did it with elan. So I'm hoping very much that most of you here would know about the Bhawal Sannyasi case. Shall we see a show of hands? Fabulous, fabulous. Okay, so Arunati, before we throw open the floor, it would be lovely if you would read a little passage. I think one of the passages is Hajra Sahib's.
Yeah, okay. I'll just take out my glasses. I'll just read a short passage. I'll just put it in context. It says, this is after, actually, initially when the sannyasi came, he didn't immediately claim to be the Major Kumar. He, in fact, said, I'm just a sannyasi from the north. I don't know Bangla. I don't know anything. Please don't, disturb me. But everybody recognized him. The subjects recognized him. His family recognized him. And then at one point, he admitted that he was the Major Kumar. Now, soon after that, the subjects of the kingdom of Bhawal got together and they had a huge gathering of people, and including the zamindars of the adjoining districts. They all got together and they decided that the sannyasi was none other than Ramindra Raman Rai, and that he was the legal heir to the kingdom. So after that, when they are all, celebrating and shouting, "Joy Muddham Kumarer joy, joy Raja Ramendra Narayaner joy," men shouted and embraced each other, women ululated and blew conches, and children shrieked with fear. In the excitement of the moment, no one noticed that the sky had darkened, and a Kalboshaki storm, usual at this time of the year, was about to break. It came on so suddenly that it caught everyone unawares. Lightning streaked across the sky like flaming snakes with forked tongues. Thunder crashed with a deafening boom, and the swishing of giant palms filled the air. Blinded by the fierce gusts of dust-laden wind, and eager to escape the lash of stinging rain and leaves torn from the trees that surrounded the Rajbadi, the gathering dispersed in minutes. People rose hastily to their feet and fled in different directions. Old age and lumbago made me slower than the rest. Now, this is being told by a fictional character called Kashinath Hazra, who is one of the tenants of the estate. Old age and lumbago made me slower than the rest, and I was one of the last to leave the place. As I hobbled across the compound, a strange sound came to my ears. It was deep and sonorous, rising above all the others. I glanced in the direction from where it had come. And now, my eyes beheld a scene I will never forget in my life. An elephant, enormous as a mass of cloud, stood near the dais. Its front legs were raised, its trunk lifted in an arc, high in the air like a trumpet. I recognized it. As boys, we often played outside the royal stables, which housed 40 horses and 20 elephants. This was Phoolmala, the Major Kumar's favorite. The stormy air resonated with the creature's cry, a cry of joy. And on her back, the sannyasi sat in the pouring rain, back upright, shoulders straight, head held high, dreadlocks blowing about his face in the unruly wind. Master and animal knew each other, recognized one another. The two forms blended into one like a magnificent piece of sculpture. This man was no longer the sadhu who had sat tense and timorous on the buckland bund, fending uncomfortable questions. He was a regal, stately figure. The Major Kumar had declared his identity and resumed the posture that had been his through life.
Excellent, excellent. Really does show you with this vignette that animals cannot lie, animals never lie. So the relationship between that elephant and Major Kumar is so well signposted. You know, in this account at least. Round it up? Yes, coming now. Yes. We came in late, sure. Okay, so let's see a show of hands. Who will go first? Question? Yes, thank you.
My question to Dr. Chakravarti, you mentioned the challenges and historical fiction, not only the Mendicant Prince, even for Daughters of Jorashako, and the challenges, though the fiction author does not have the responsibility to be historically accurate, but yes, there are challenges, especially when the information is very skimpy in nature. And other than your own novels, you have also translated one of the cult.
Could you hold your mic a little closer? I'm not able to hear you properly.
Okay. Can you hear now?
Yeah, now I can.
Yeah. So other than your novels, you have also translated one of the historical fiction cult also. So this challenge, especially when the information available is very skimpy, and how as a responsibility of the author is to be not fully authentic or accurate, but as much as possible. How do you mitigate that challenge? And also in future, any idea, clue you can give of more projects that you are planning?
Thank you for your question. Arunadi?
That's many questions in one, actually.
We have to keep it a little
we
tight.
have to keep it short.
Yeah.
So, you know, in all my books, whether it's in my Jorashako books or this book, the facts are accurate, they're documented, they're absolutely authentic. Even the dates have been adhered to. So nobody can find any fault with my factual retelling of the stories. So, but of course, fiction has come in a large way, because what I wanted to do was not write about the facts. The facts have been written, both about the Jorashako, not the women, but about the Jorashako, Rabindranath and his brothers. A lot has been written about them. And also the legal case is I mean, in the public domain, everyone knows everything about it. My challenge lay in fleshing out the characters, in creating an ambience, you know, drawing the reader into the world that I was describing. It's not a linear account of facts that you will get from a history book or from a legal records and all that. You can get it easily. But what I wanted to do is to create a world which was living, dynamic, even evolving, like even the characters evolve.
So a fiction, you use the fiction writer's privilege and license.
But I never do tamper with the facts. That I've never done.
All right, next question. Yes, please.
Very good afternoon to both of you.
Thank you.
And welcome to Kolkata Military Meet as well.
Thank you.
So I have a very pertinent question that the way you pictured Bibhavati, that she is a modern woman and at the same time she's having troubles accepting the predicament of her life. So this is still true in the villages of West Bengal vis-a-vis the villages of India, where women, despite being educated there, face a number of challenges. They are often victims of domestic violence, so on and so forth. So how would you respond to that in the perspective of Bibhavati?
See, that is of course true. What you're saying is true. But I like to believe, and I think I'm right, that at least things have become better. They've become marginally better. At least in the cosmopolitan towns, one doesn't see the kind of acceptance of infidelity. I mean, in the upper classes, of course, one sees it in
or the abuse.
The abuse. One doesn't see women really accepting it so easily. But we can't forget that this book was set in a period nearly 150 years ago. So at that time, women were conditioned, they were socialized into accepting this. And so we mustn't forget that, and we mustn't judge them by our present day, you know, understanding of the man-woman relationship.
Thank you. question? Yes, yes, Vibha.
Okay, so Arunadi, I think you've done a brilliant job of Shuril Gangopadhyay, because for the first time after many, many years, we saw a translation which read so well in English. And, it really reads like an English novel. It's very lucid, it's flowing. So my question is about translations. We had another session earlier. So translations, very often one feels that you lose the gist of the vernacular, the original vernacular novel. So how does the process go? I haven't read Sheisho Moisho. I am unable to, the exactness of the script and the translation process.
Vibha, I think it's a great question, but I think the concern with the author is that because we're short of time, she will attempt an answer, but this is not, a module on translation. So she will make it short.
Any other question? You want me to respond? Yes, actually, the point is that many translators just translate the language. They just take it word by word and sentence by sentence. And I don't think that's the way to translate. The way I translate is I read an author, thoroughly. I read the book 3 or 4 times. I imbibe it. And then I express it in my own words. And in that, maybe the literal translation is lost. Maybe if you pick a certain word, and the way I have used it, the dictionary may contradict that. But I like to translate the spirit of the work. I like to bring in the tonality of the author's voice. So that is what I try to do. And that's why I suppose, as you said, that it reads like a creative piece of work and not like a translation.
Thank you, thank you. Is there any other question? We are ready to take one more. Okay, then let's call it a day on our panel. Thank you so much. It's been a marvelous conversation.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you, audience, for being so
Thank you,
patient.
Malubika, for having us. And
Thank you, Malubika,
for all the
having us.
wonderful work that goes on behind the scenes to make this a success. Thanks very much. Thank you, audience.